Have you been considering a DIY lumber rack for your shop? Well, you're in luck, because I got some free plans as well as this build video to show you exactly how to do that. You can build this entire lumber rack in a single day. To complete this project, the first step is to cut out the 5-foot vertical pieces. First, you're going to want to cross-cut one end square on each of the 2x4 pieces that you have. Then you can simply flip over that 2x4, mark it out at 5 feet. You can also create a stop to make this easy for you, but in the end, all you gotta do is cross-cut these at 5 feet. For this DIY lumber rack, we're gonna need a total of 7 of these 5-foot boards. The second step of this project is to create the 45-degree supports. To create these, we're gonna first cut one end square. Afterwards, we can create a stop at 17 1/8. Once you've created your stop at 17 1/8, you can go ahead and cross-cut 14 of these boards out. All in all, this DIY lumber rack only requires 12 2x4s at 8 feet. Let's continue creating these 45-degree supports by angling the miter saw to 45 degrees. We'll go ahead and lock it down and cut each of the 14 boards that we cut out at 17 1/8 and cut out a 45-degree angle at the end. One unique thing about this DIY lumber rack is how I build it and install it and create level racks so that boards about 8 feet and a little bit longer can be housed completely level with one another.
Alright, so to make these cuts simple, I created this to where it's long enough where if you have 2 miters the same direction, when you cut the final miter in the middle, it's going to create 2 support pieces in one cut. So let's get started.
Now, we're going to leave the stop block in place still, but just simply add a 2x4 after the stop block to easily create this other 45-degree angle on the other end of the board. We're going to want to cut this 45-degree angle out on all 14 of the boards. Now, to complete these support pieces, we simply want to mount a stop at 9 1/4, and this is going to give our final cross cut. By following these steps, after this simple 45-degree cross cut, you're going to have made 28 45-degree supports at 9 1/4. The third step of this project is to cut out the 14-inch rack boards. Just as we did with the previous 2x4s, we're going to also cut one end square on each of these boards. Next, we're going to create our stop at 14 inches. Now, with that done, we can simply cross-cut 28 of these 14-inch boards out. The fourth step is to mount the 14-inch boards onto the 5-foot boards. To easily accomplish this, we're going to simply drill pocket holes, and I happen to be using the Craig jig, so let's go ahead and drill 2 pocket holes out. We'll be drilling 2 pocket holes in each of the 14-inch rack boards at only one end. Once we have all the pocket holes drilled out, we're going to go ahead and clamp a straight edge onto the 5-foot boards. With the straight edge clamped down and the 5-foot boards together, we'll just go ahead and mount the 14-inch rack boards straight onto the 5-foot boards with our Craig screws. I recommend using a non-impact driver to drive these Craig screws down into these pocket holes. That way, you can feel when they hit the bottom of the pocket hole. To complete this step of the project, you're going to want to simply repeat that process for all 4 rows. The 5th step entails mounting the 45-degree supports. Before mounting the 45-degree supports, you're going to want to sandwich those 2x4s together with flat boards to create a level shelf. After those flat boards are clamped down, you're going to want to take a countersink pilot hole and drill 2 pilot holes in each of the 45-degree supports. With the countersink pilot holes drilled, we can go ahead and mount these 45-degree supports with 2-inch screws. Here's a profile view of how those screws are mounted. To finish this step of the project, we're going to go ahead and repeat the same process for all 4 rows. To mount all 28 45-degree supports, you're going to want 56 2-inch screws. By following these exact steps, this method produces very level, even racks. Now we have all 7 racks completely constructed. Now before we can hang them on the wall, we're going to need to complete step 6, which is finding and marking the stud locations. You'll want to locate 7 studs for each of the 7 racks. And also, you're going to want to mark these stud locations above and below where your rack is going to be mounted. The 7th step is to level and position your lumber rack. To accomplish this, you're going to want to level and then temporarily mount a 2x4 at the bottom where your lumber rack is going to be. Next, to finish leveling your lumber rack, you're going to simply clamp the outside racks together with a 2x4 and then temporarily secure them down. In the 8th step, we're going to go ahead and set each rack into place. This installation method is actually important to the lumber rack, as this method of installation enables us to create a completely level lumber rack by referencing each rack off of that 2x4 and clamping it to the 2x4 before we securely mount it in place. So after positioning this rack on the stud center, we can go ahead and temporarily mount it in place. To complete this step of the project, we're just going to go ahead and repeat that same process for the rest of the lumber racks. The 9th step is to securely mount each of the racks onto the wall with 4-inch lag screws. To accomplish this, we're going to first drill a pilot hole. Next, we can drive our 4-inch lag screw into the 2x4 stud. For this DIY lumber rack, we're going to be mounting 4-inch lag screws at the top of each rack, the middle of each rack, and the bottom of each rack for a total of 21 4-inch lag screws. If you're curious as to the structural stability of this lumber rack, I can personally tell you that I've actually hung my entire body weight off one of the racks. Me being 170 pounds didn't affect the 14-inch rack board or the 45-degree support underneath whatsoever. Now we're on the final step of the project, which is to organize the wood onto the lumber rack. From walnut to pine 2x4s, I had a bunch that I need to organize on my new DIY lumber rack. If you have any questions about the building or install of this DIY lumber rack, drop me a comment and I'll be sure to respond. I hope you really enjoyed this Shopfix video and found the content valuable in the creation of a DIY lumber rack. Well, I wish you all the best of luck with your future woodworking projects, and until next time, take care.